for chatting with us at The Christian Beat today about your new music that just released. So I wanted to start with the congratulations. It's exciting for you, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'm curious, because you obviously called it The Work Volume 2, kind of a nod to your first album as well. And I'm kind of curious how this sophomore project for you kind of continued the story enough for you that you kind of wanted to call it as you did, and how it feels like it connects.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had this really creative answer. So the idea I've had all along has been that at the end of the day, these worship songs we write, they're a liturgy of sorts. Maybe they're a liturgy for Sundays, maybe they're a liturgy for Monday through Saturday, depending on the people and what they need, I suppose, and the song, I guess. And so I'd kind of, but the word liturgy, practice of faith, it just means the work of the people. And so I'd kind of always had this idea that for my solo worship stuff, I would call the records the work, and then if I ever recorded a live album, it would be called Of the People, and leave it at that. Sort of a moment in time, I think Adele does 19 and 21. And it's just like, what, I think this works for me. I think I can. Otherwise, I would probably overthink the album title Forever and Ever Amen.
No, that's very fair. Very fair. So I'm curious then, since you have kind of that vision of your solo work, how this one in particular, this collection of songs, what vision you had for it, and how you hoped that it would connect with the listeners once it was released.
Yeah, oh man. Well, I don't know if everyone feels this way, but I suspect that they do. The last few years have been crazy. So it probably is best understood, strangely, as a sense that things were crazy before it even got real crazy. So I met my co-producer Brent Milligan years ago. We started hanging out and became friends, and we really wanted to work together on this record. And we already had a sense, musically, artistically, lyrically, of, I guess, a sort of bittersweet, like an album that would be as much lament as it is celebration and hope. And I think the words that we landed on are kind of stubbornly hopeful. I know it just feels to me like we're in this moment in time where the behavior of a lot of Christians in public and public Christians is such that many reasonable thinking believers are left feeling like they have the choice only between collapsing into insanity or total deconstruction, and they're kind of left with this really hardcore binary. Whereas if you read a couple church history books and learn, hey, this isn't the first time the world's been weird, then it can help a lot. And most importantly, I think for me, like what some people call deconstruction, which is like looking at your beliefs and saying, hey, which of these are beliefs that have been Christian all along, and which of these are beliefs that might be, say, idiosyncratic or recent additions to the faith that I was just incorrectly taught are basic Christian beliefs. That's a really healthy thing. That process for me started 20 years ago. So I can't say that this record's like a deconstruction record, because it's not, but it is a hopeful clinging to what I do know to be true amidst some really difficult emotions and feelings about the state of the church in public.
Absolutely. So I know that you did mention you wrote and produced or co-produced on the album. I'm curious then if there's any track or lyric or something that has changed meaning for you already in the amount of time that you've seen it, kind of evolve.
Several actually. So there's two tracks that were written well before COVID that bizarrely ended up infinitely more relevant when everything with COVID and beyond has taken place. The gospel is rest, and we're here because you're here. Both sort of took on completely new meaning after churches were needing to be in lockdown and all of that stuff. It was really, really different how that all worked, and experiencing something near to burnout myself in that process. The Gospel is Rest really took on a new angle. These could be things that were coming, and I needed to, have a better eye out for, but definitely they evolved in how they were understood. And I think the degree to which people really connected with them has had a lot to do with, those are my two most popular songs from this record at this point. And I think it has a lot to do with where people are at.
I was actually going to ask one of the questions, since it has been out for a little bit of time. Listeners have been able to listen through to the whole thing. If there had been any tracks or lyrics or things that were starting to stand out to you in the feedback and the comments that you were getting from the listeners. So sounds like those two tracks are two of them right there.
Yeah, I think people are asking a lot of questions right now, not necessarily about do we need to be the church, but what does church need to be in our day and in the wake of all that's happened, particularly here in Canada, where churches were smaller in the first place. And so there's a lot of question asking going on. And so some of what's at the heart of We're Here Because You're Here is really asking questions about. I'm not anti-lights. I'm not against production. I quite enjoy playing music live and all of that stuff. It's not like we can only sing hymns from the book, otherwise we're in trouble. That's not my take at all. However, I do think when we lean merely on the mechanisms themselves and don't look to those mechanisms as a mode of prayer, as a mode of communing with God, we lose a lot. And maybe the entire thing. And so there are lyrics in We're Here Because You're Here that are really kind of wrestling with that, for us to come earnestly. And I think that's probably the word that characterizes this record for me. I threw it up to a few friends before we got started, and they were like, hey, it's really hopeful and lamenting and complicated in a way, and in that sense feels very honest and earnest. And their words, not mine, in a way that worship music sometimes doesn't. And I think that was something that, yes, we're praying prayers for people to pray, but if I read the Psalms, I don't often get a sense that David is merely writing a thing for people to pray. You get the sense that David's in it. Mm-hmm. And so, I know sometimes people will spiritualize that around worship songs. And the truth is, some of these songs are really intended for congregations to sing, and most of them are intended for people to experience and listen to. And so I'm going to be upfront about that. And so there's quite a lot of songs where my own life is really in it, in the song, and that is what it is. And I think I'm probably more okay with that now than I ever have been.
That's good, though. And I know that you also had other artists on this album, too. So I'm sure that there is some of their lives that also kind of bleed into the album and kind of infuse with yours. Are there any particular ones that you want to call out or kind of talk through that stand out for you?
Oh, yeah. The one that stands out to me the most in that area is probably Kyrie Eleison, It's Mercy We Need, which on the album features Citizens. I co-wrote the song with Zach Boland of Citizens. He's a friend. And we had been talking about the fact that we had had very similar experiences. Him at Mars Hill with Mark Driscoll and all of the events that were outlined in the podcast of the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill, which everyone has feelings about, of course. And myself at a much smaller church in a much smaller context, but a very similar personality type. And I think, we were saying, hey, it's strange how people often jump to easy explanations for these things. Someone like Mark Driscoll exists because of power or scale or the megachurch or this or that. And I had an experience of a pastor very similar, and I still have a very complicated relationship to that part of my life in terms of I see so much good and some hurt in that too. And there was no video, there was no podcast, it was just a small church, mm-hmm. And so I think, the reality is human beings are a complicated mess, and Zach and I experienced it in both the ocean and the puddle. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, there's a reason that at the heart of the Christian story is the call to receive and give mercy. Now that doesn't justify bad behavior, and I think that's pretty clear in the song what our angle on that is. But I don't think we can come at things like that as believers in a purely them-oriented manner. I think, it does require of us, in order to speak intelligently into what's broken in the church, we need to look deeply at what's broken in ourselves as well. So I don't know that we can hold court without confessing. And so that's kind of, I think, where that song landed for us. And the way it came together is this really hodgepodge thing with, it's very COVID. We had a remote choir. People uploaded their own performances via Dropbox, and we mixed it together, and it has these incredible harmonies from singers from all over the world. And then Zach and I, two white dudes, almost rapping poorly while we make it, It's a really strange song. It has kind of almost this Gorillaz-ish quality to it, but I really, really love that song. It musically really hits home for me in a big way, and is such a beautiful symbol of kind of, at least for Zach and I, the common ground that we shared in that experience.
Absolutely. I'm also curious, now that the music and the songs themselves are out there and being shared, do you have any goals or kind of visions for other ways to share them? So like if you want to pair some with video components, or just performing some of them live, like any that you're really looking forward to, those types of things?
Yeah, I mean, I think things have changed. Once upon a time, Street Week was the death of was like everything. If you didn't have a smash hit on the day the album was out, your album never existed, and you better get to work. I think that's changed a lot. I think things like TikTok and YouTube and Instagram have changed the game entirely, in that Street Week with streaming is the beginning. Mm-hmm. So it's funny, like we've thought about music videos and all of that, and I do kind of plan, once we're settled in here in Canada, to kind of keep the story rolling by doing that. But almost the biggest part of it for me, I've come to really enjoy TikTok and Instagram Reels, and not just from a musical standpoint, but also just kind of talking about what's important to me in worship and in life and faith, and connecting with people, and kind of the conversational element of that. I know a lot of artists don't love it, but I really do. I love the kind of two-way conversation part of it. Mm-hmm. So I'm doing that all the time, and plan to do that all the time. So maybe I'll irritate people with how long we're talking about this record. But I full on plan to keep making, keep finding ways to tell the story better and more creatively.
No, that I think that sometimes enhances the music as well, and kind of helps share the heart behind it, and as well. I'm curious though, so I mean, obviously your music can be an inspiration for some of those who are listening, but I'm curious kind of the flip of that, where you're currently drawing your inspiration, either, spiritually, musically, those types of areas.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm probably in a place where the thing that sits on my dining room table is the Book of Common Prayer. It's this Anglican liturgy thing that I turn to all the time. I really enjoy podcasts a lot, so I get a lot from that. Musically, I'm all over the place all of the time. So I'm very, very eclectic. I can't even say with any confidence that I only listen to Christian music, or even mostly listen to Christian music. So I kind of mostly come across new Christian records by recommendation and that sort of thing. And I'm kind of enjoying that. There's a certain beauty to losing the fear of having to be or say something of a certain kind, Mm-hmm. And by that I mean like the pursuit of relevance or that sort of thing. I hope that I remain relevant because I'm aware of what's happening in the world and I'm connected to that. Mm-hmm. But I don't really sit down every week and see what all the big Christian songs are and that sort of thing. It's not something I really do. And my experience is that very few Christian artists actually do that. So I'm listening to all kinds of stuff all of the time, really. To get specific would be difficult, but I recently loved the Killers record, and I love Advanced Joy and a few other things that are out there, and some pretty obscure stuff too. So
Fair. No, that's a good question. I know we're getting close to time, so I have one final question for you, and we can kind of wrap up. But I'm curious what you're most expectant for in the remainder of this year as you look for what's ahead.
Yeah, personally, we're settling. Sorry, choked there for a second. Personally, we're settling in Hamilton, and that's a big change after 10 years in Nashville. So it's going to be interesting. I'm really excited to kind of reconnect with friends and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But musically, like I said, the album is the beginning of the story. So we've got shows coming up that are really, really exciting. And, I've put out 2 records and a B-sides EP now. I think we kind of now turn our eyes to what does the live record look like? What does it look like for us to translate these songs to a totally different context and bring them for people to sing? So I don't know when that's going to be, but that's, I think, where we sort of start to look.
No, that's awesome. And again, I just wanted to thank you for taking the time today. I really enjoyed getting to talk to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jesse.
Yeah, absolutely.